We're going to delve more into the current U.S.-China relationship with Paolo Von Schirach. He's president of the Global Policy Institute here in Washington, D.C. Paolo, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Lots of messages in this white paper released by the Chinese government. What is your major takeaway?
My major takeaway is that China stands its ground. There's been a lot of back and forth on the trade issue, and of course, the Shangri-La event in Singapore is kind of different but related. So both on its own national security issues that have been challenged by the United States government, by the acting defense secretary in Singapore, claiming that we are in a rules-based system and China acting unilaterally here and there. So that's one issue. The other issue, of course, is trade, this complicated morass, frankly, that has become the attempt to find some kind of a solution agreeable to both parties, Washington and Beijing. And I suspect, that's my own hunch, that China just didn't like the idea. There was had become sort of the almost semi-official narrative in the U.S. media that China was forced to get a deal because things are not going so well with the Chinese economy and all that. This is kind of the speculation that was actively made, a few months and weeks ago. And so that the United States was winning and China was losing. And China comes back and says, no, none of that. We're not giving anything away. We want a deal, but we want an equitable deal. And if that's not available, suit yourself. We can continue. I mean, it's going to be unpleasant, but we don't have to fear anything. That's kind of the message I got from the statement in Beijing. And certainly the statement by the defense minister in Singapore is, you've got to respect our sovereignty. You got to respect the agreements regarding Taiwan and the status of Taiwan, which everybody understands is extremely sensitive in mainland China. And, as far as the South China Sea, we're doing what we're supposed to do.
Many observers are saying that it is no longer just a trade war, but a trade war plus, meaning that there was this tariffs war to start with, and later on, Washington, the security apparatus decided that they're going to seize the momentum and engage China in South China Sea on the issue of Taiwan, in the issue of security. Do you agree with that assessment? Now
yes.
We're in a trade war plus.
Definitely, this is trade war plus. There is, again, a new party, if you wish, in Washington that sees China as the new overall global strategic challenge to the United States. So the idea was, well, once upon a time, we had the Soviet Union, completely different circumstances, the confrontation, Europe, Berlin, all that. Well, that's gone. Well, now the emerging existential threat to the United States is China, which I would say it's to put it mildly, it's a bit of an exaggeration. But again, there is a kind of so these positions are kind of mutually reinforcing. Well, look what's happening militarily, look what's happening on trade. I still believe, and the tone of the Chinese positions, or at least the utterances, is, notwithstanding the firmness, is quite conciliatory. In other words, China says, we don't accept this approach, but we're open. Our door is open for serious negotiation. So I don't believe we are now at some kind of an impasse whereby, okay, all bets are off, no negotiations, and everybody will do whatever they please. I think that the Chinese responses on both sides are, I wouldn't say conciliatory, but reasonably open in terms of possibilities to continue the dialogue and reach some kind of an agreement.
Let's step back a little bit and talk about the intention of Washington to launch this trade war about a year ago. President Trump said over and over again that it is about intellectual property, it is about forced technology transfer, but many observers in Beijing, many scholars that I've talked to, pointed out that there is this strategic intention to ring in the closest enemy, because when China's GDP got to 60% of that of the U.S., as China has done, the world's #1 is feeling insecure.
Indeed. I mean, look, it's very hard, to be honest with you, to read the strategic plan, if there is any, of the Trump administration. Remember, all this started with the notion that there was a trade imbalance, which there is, and saying that the trade imbalance between the United States and China, in and as of itself, is evidence of foul play, which anybody including people who don't necessarily love China, would say, no, that's nonsense. That doesn't mean anything. You know, trade imbalance by itself it means that we save less and consume more, and this is why we buy from abroad. That's really what it means. But then these other things were added on, meaning intellectual property rights, licensing, technology transfer, and all that. And then it became like China is sort of an unreliable partner, and therefore we cannot really trust them on multiple levels. And I'm not quite sure who's winning the intellectual policy dialogue or debate within the Trump administration at this point. Clearly, there are some hardliners, but there are others who really understand that trade wars are bad for everybody. Americans are suffering already.
There's no winners but losers in the trade war, as many experts pointed out. Thanks so much, Paolo Von Schirach. Thank you so much for your insight.